Increasing number of compounding risks and threats. The high inflation, geopolitical unrest, energy insecurity, and of course, the many effects of climate change. Science is clearly showing that we must make deep civilization-wide changes by 2030, and that worldwide action is more urgent than ever previously assessed. So simultaneous transitions are needed globally across all the different energy systems, the industrial system, the urban, the infrastructure system, so that we can enable those measures of mitigation, adaptation at the pace and at the scale that it's needed. Climate impacts, for example, heat waves or flooding, just to name a few, are amplified even more when they occur at the local level and in cities. And cities continue to find themselves on the front line of delivering and responding to climate change, yet they cannot really deliver solutions alone. So there is a good news. The good news is that there are options available right now in every sector to cut emission and to facilitate resilience. And there is also a critical opportunity that comes with urbanization to really advance climate resilience development and increase community well-being. That said, all of this opportunity can only work if we collectively work together, innovating, investing, and partnering up to deliver on these much-needed transitions. So today, we want to discuss exactly this. We want to use this consideration as a backdrop for our conversation, talk about how we can accelerate regulatory, technical, but in particular financial solutions to help close the gap between planning but also deploying solutions across our system at the urban level. We will zoom in on the role of cities as solution provider, creator of innovation, as well as critical owners of the demand that is needed for innovative climate solutions. We will hear about experiences on developing strategies, developing climate action plans, and also approaches that have been tested by communities on the ground to facilitate the urban transition. We will exchange on how to achieve stronger collaboration, stronger multi-level governance, and cooperation between the local and the national level to really enable these pathways. We will try to touch upon and ideally respond to some of these questions and look into how can innovation help us in investing in a better future. What is the cost of inaction? How does it impact on our life, on our community, not investing in making our environment better? And how can we unlock the finance that is really needed? And what are the partnerships that can help us enable this finance to reach a net zero resilient future? So to get us started in this conversation, it is my great pleasure to give the floor now for our opening remarks to Gregor Robertson. He's the Global Ambassador of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Gregor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Georgia, and good morning, everyone. As Georgia said, I'm Gregor Robertson, the Global Covenant of Mayors Global Ambassador and former mayor of Vancouver in Canada, a city far from here, but sharing many of the beautiful qualities of Moroccan cities as well, by the ocean and the mountains. I'm going to start with the broader context here. Georgia has already described the opportunity and the many challenges that we face around energy transition in the climate crisis. The energy transition is absolutely essential for us fighting the climate crisis on three main levels, and it depends where you are in the world. Energy safety is a huge issue when you relate it to the impact from fossil fuels or from nuclear. Renewable energy is far safer. That's the reason that many communities and countries are making the transition. Security, energy security is a big issue for some countries and cities, making sure they have local energy supply that is clean, that they have jurisdiction over, rather than depending on energy sources far away. Most of the wars and conflict in recent decades has been related to energy security and fossil fuel supply in particular. So we have a more secure world when we transition to renewable energy, as well as the affordability and access piece. Many cities are focused on the energy transition to renewables to make sure that the price of energy, the cost for people, and the access to energy is improved, particularly in places where it's hard to get energy. Almost 1 billion people do not have access to electricity in the world today. It's hard for many of us to believe, but the best way to get electricity and energy to those billion people is with renewables that are local, that they have secure source and affordability. So what do we need? Speed and scale are critical. The models are proven now. It's all about speeding up and scaling the transition to renewables. We also need to go a lot farther, and we need to go a lot faster as we see climate impacts mount around the world. This work has to accelerate. Cities are on the front lines of this. Cities are motivated and are mobilizing to transform our energy, and that's good news because cities are over half of the population on the planet today. Cities are using over 3/4 of the energy. Cities are over 3/4 of the pollution that's related to fossil fuels in particular. So cities need to clean up their act and have the ability to do that. The second key element why cities are critical is because the leadership is there. We'll hear about this from our panel. Leadership is essential in driving this change, and many of the national governments are very slow to make this transition. They are still subsidizing fossil fuel development. They are not putting enough effort into the energy transition. Contrast that to cities, where there is a lot of leadership. 12,700 cities and local communities that are part of the Global Covenant of Mayors have made this commitment to the transition to net zero energy, to reduce carbon in our cities, which is great news. That leadership is absolutely key to this happening. Georgia mentioned the importance of innovation, and the Urban Transitions Mission that she is leading with GCOM as a partner is all about innovation of the best practices. What is the best technology we can deploy at a local level to transform our energy systems? So there's 3 key steps. As a mayor, we looked at this transition to 100% renewable, first and foremost with energy efficiency, reducing the amount of energy that we use in our cities. The second piece is about electrifying everything. The buildings and transportation are the source of pollution. We have to transition all of our buildings to renewable electricity. We have to transition all of our transportation to be clean. So that electrification is the second key piece. And then the third piece is scaling up renewables. Morocco is doing a great job of this. We're seeing great examples in this country and in towns like the mayor of Chefchaouen. Many of the cities here in Morocco are in this transition to phase out fossil fuels and scale up renewables. That is critical to the change, to reduce the climate crisis, to make sure it's more affordable energy, that there's access, everyone, to energy, and to improve health and well-being. The community benefits from this enormously, and we see this whether it's the quality of the air in our cities, inside our buildings. We know there are health and public health benefits to reducing pollution and the transition to clean energy. Global Covenant of Mayors is a partner, as Georgia said, with the Urban Transitions Mission. And the Urban Transitions Mission brings together the mission innovation partners. This is the energy ministers from the biggest countries in the world, dozens of countries who are participating, and now working with cities to accelerate the energy transition and find those pathways to net zero. And we want to find our way to this, basically building the capacity up, helping close the gaps with the research and the development and the deployment of renewable energy, electricity, and in particular to make sure that we empower cities around the world of all sizes and shapes to adopt these innovative solutions. We need to support that, as Georgia said, on the finance side. We need the tools to do that, and the deployment and implementation of the best technologies. And where this has now started is a really exciting opportunity now. We're already working with 48 cities around the world. They have been the leadership group in terms of looking at holistic, people-centered transitions and these pathways to implement clean energy in our cities. Those 48 cities are the very beginning, and we now have a call out for 250 more cities to join this effort this year. August 21st is the call that is open until that August 21st deadline for 250 more cities to be partners and to benefit from that partnership to accelerate clean energy in their cities and decarbonize. And so on behalf of the Urban Transitions Mission and the Global Covenant of Mayors, I just want to conclude by inviting all of you to spread the word. If you know cities, communities that you think should be participating, that will benefit from that accelerated transition to clean energy, please tell them about the work that Georgia is leading on the Urban Transitions Mission. And we're going to hear many more details about this and some specific stories about what's happening on the ground in our cities with utilities, levels of government, private sector, the partnerships that make all of this possible. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Georgia and the panel.
Thank you very much, Gregor, for the kind introduction, and in particular, not only for reminding us when we're talking about urban transitions, what we really talk about. We talk about the quality of life of our citizens. You made the very important point of the issues around energy access, energy poverty, and many more challenges that the most vulnerable part of our communities are facing. And thank you in particular also for stressing out the opportunity, because that's what we want to discuss very much today. We want to talk about the opportunity to use this challenge to really further the action, the implementation of the policies, of the solutions that we've been developing together for the past years, and see how we can strengthen partnership to really deliver on the implementation through sustainable finance, but also through continuing raising the level of our ambition. And thanks also for the shout out to the Urban Transition Mission and to engaging with us. I am, of course, talking about a very important topic and a quite tall order to try to find solutions, really, to deploy innovation that can help us also through finance deliver on some of these challenges. But the good news is I'm not going to be alone to discuss about this. I have with me a very exciting and a very distinguished lineup of speakers that will be connecting online and are here in person on stage with us. So I would like to introduce them to you. Beside me, Mayor Mohamed Sefiani is the mayor of the Chefchaouen, Morocco, and also one of our Urban Transition Mission city. It's always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you. I'm also joined online by João Diniz. He is the director of the Empresa Municipal de Ambiente in Cascais, Portugal. I'm joined online by Anis Terai, the director of Tel Group SPV Infrastructure. Also joining us online, Joanna McLean-Mazic. She's the global lead for Sustainable City Infrastructure and Services Global Solution Group at the World Bank. And then coming back here again on stage with us, Sophia Johar, Associate Banker for Sustainable Infrastructure Group of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And last but by no means the least, with us on stage here, Laila Miku. She's the Director for Sustainable Development at CDG Capital. So as you can hear, quite a strong group of people here happy to discuss with us this very important opportunity to really unlock the urban transition in a way that is meaningful to deliver on climate change. But as every transition, we talked about the opportunity, but it's also good to take stock of the challenges. So maybe that's what I would like to start from, and I'm looking at you, Mayor Sefiani. Can you tell us a little bit about the key gaps, the challenges that you've been encountering when it comes to delivering on your vision to climate neutrality and resilience?
Thank you very much, Georgia. Thanks to Gregor for the remarks to open this session. Donc, I will switch to French. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité, de partager avec vous quelques histoires, notamment pour la ville de Chefchaouen. Donc, la ville de Chefchaouen est une ville intermédiaire qui fait partie de la région dont j'ai été Al-Hoceima. Il est à 2 heures d'ici. On l'appelle la ville bleue qui tourne vers le vert, voilà, et qui est engagée dans le vert. Parce que nous avons décidé il y a plusieurs années que notre ville soit une ville écologique, soit une ville durable. Et nous travaillons dans ce sens-là, dans les différents domaines, des différents secteurs qui bien sûr, que nous gérons. Et ça, on ne le fait pas tout seul, mais on le fait avec un appui multiniveau qui est très important avec la province, la région, au niveau national. Et lorsque je parle national, il y a le ministère de l'Intérieur, la Direction générale des collectivités territoriales, dont les représentants sont avec nous, qui nous appuient fortement dans des sujets tels que l'eau, l'énergie, l'infrastructure et tout ce qui est transformation de la ville, soit un appui technique, soit un appui financier. Et je tiens à le remercier. Donc, il y a une vision. Nous avons mis en place une vision en 2030. C'est une vision qui a été mise en place avec une approche participative. Nous l'avions présentée officiellement il y a à peu près 5 ans lors du premier forum mondial des villes intermédiaires qui a eu lieu à Chefchaouen en juillet 2018. Et là, cette vision-là, elle était avec nous. Voilà. Il y a des amis qui étaient avec nous et qui restent avec nous aussi, qui restent avec nous. Donc, il y a cette idée pour que notre ville devienne une ville durable, une ville résiliente, une ville écologique. Et bien sûr, il fallait passer à la planification après la vision. Et nous avons bien sûr, nous avions le PCD, le plan communal de développement, et puis le plan d'action communal depuis 2015, et puis en 2021, on a un plan d'action dans ce sens-là. Et bien sûr, la question de climat, développement durable, elle est hyper importante. Mais on a allé un peu plus loin dans cet aspect-là en joignant le Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, le GCOM, qui bien sûr nous a aussi aidé, appuyé, à tracer, à faire un inventaire des gaz à effet de serre, à préparer des plans, etc. Et puis des projets pilotes ensemble. Et récemment, nous étions aidés par Climamed, et je les remercie, les représentants, ils sont là, pour nous préparer un plan d'action de l'énergie durable et climat. C'est un Climate Action Plan que nous avons maintenant en bonne et due forme et qui a été élaboré pour Chefchaouen et pour d'autres villes au Maroc. Il y a aussi un projet des villes durables qui vient d'être lancé par le ministère de l'Intérieur et nous faisons partie des 10 villes. Donc, il y a aussi SDG Cities avec ONU Habitat qui est lancé. Et bien sûr, nous SDG Sustainable Development Goals Cities, qui est lancé par ONU Habitat au niveau mondial, on fait partie. Donc, il y a cet accompagnement parce que nous n'avons pas les ressources humaines, techniques nécessaires et suffisantes pour élaborer ça, parce qu'il y a l'engagement politique, il est là, l'engagement de la société civile, il est là, mais avoir une assistance technique, nous l'avons besoin, parce que nous avons joint aussi Race to Zero, Race to Resilience, donc c'est un engagement mondial, la course zéro neutralité, la course de résilience, mais aussi cette technique. Donc, ce que je dis, il y a cette ambition et cet engagement. Nous avons démarré à mettre en œuvre notre plan d'action et surtout le volet énergie durable et climat, mais bien sûr avec les différents appuis des différentes institutions et pour pouvoir passer à l'implémentation. Nous avons déjà passé, mais petit à petit on implémente l'ensemble des projets et des programmes de notre plan d'action.
Thank you very much, and I think it's a very well-deserved applause, the one that you just got, because you, of course, were able to share with us some of the challenges, and you spoke about the importance of technical assistance, the need that local governments have to access finance, and we will talk about it a little bit with our colleagues here from financial institutions as well, but you also gave a clear vision of what does it mean to set up a strategy forward-looking to a full transition, and the importance that political commitment across level has in making sure that we can deliver on these objectives. And Gregor mentioned it earlier, there are over 12,700 cities that have embarked together with Chef Shawen on this journey to really reach these objectives, some of which have decided also to join the Urban Transition Mission. And on the line, we have João Diniz from the city of Cascais. I hope you can hear us, João.
A few issues, but I think I can hear you well.
Fantastic. Thank you for being with us. So, João, I would like to ask the same question that I ask here, Mayor Sefiani. What are the challenges and the gaps that you see in implementing Cascais' vision to become a climate-neutral, resilient community?
Good morning. Thank you so much for this very kind invitation. I do hope you hear me well. I can see you well and hear you well. But in this case, in the case of Cascais, energy transition, the challenges are very similar to any other that you might find in any other city, wherever it is from the world, not just in Europe. I think that when we are driving market-led initiatives, namely on energy, on mobility, on building regulation, we must engage with governmental authorities. So we are given the regulatory framework that allows us to move forward from carbon-based solutions into green-based solutions. For example, in mobility, we tend to go for the easiest and cheapest solutions. For example, diesel. When it comes for mobility, electric mobility, usually it has a bigger initial cost, but it has a more reduced cost down the pipeline. So it's obviously for public authorities such as ourselves, it's very difficult for us to engage with these changes. Finally, when it comes also to provide the city design, obviously our urban planning is made for a current, let's say, practice of consumption. We need to move around. We need areas of leisure. We need areas of production. Obviously, when we are designing a city, we need to consider this new paradigm of carbon-free solutions. We need to produce a closer, intimate city where people can live closer to each other and throughout the day. This is absolutely crucial for us. And it's very difficult to provide nowadays because cities are well established. People want to change. People don't want to commute every day. But for some reason, this is not tackling and moving forward. And I would say that the main issue that we are facing is we need governments, national governments, a better, let's say, framework again for these cities, these sustainable cities to strive. I don't want to live in a city where I have to use my car every day, or I have to, in a 1 hour commute, I need to wait 20 minutes for a bus or for a train. Nobody desires this. So we have the people, the citizen on our side, and we need to make sure that we are able to provide what people need. So this is a great asset. We need to change, and we need to ask national governments to support cities in their endeavors to build better quality of life for everyone. This will bring competitiveness, this will increase our economical KPIs, and this will increase the quality of life of everyone. I would start with that, and I do hope you can hear me well.
Thank you very much, João. Yes, we can hear you. I hope you can hear the applause coming your way as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing out, I think, this willingness and desire to provide a systemic change in the way the cities are implementing solutions. You refer to the importance of bringing citizens and communities on board while we are implementing these different solutions and these different initiatives, but also the difficulty of enabling some of those because of limitations around the regulatory frameworks or the structure that maybe does not allow us potentially to innovate as much as possible and deliver on solutions that are more market-led. And speaking of initiatives that are more market-led, I would like to go now to Anis Terai, who is on the line as well. So we heard a little bit that the challenge, according to Joao, and also according to, of course, Mayor Sefiani here, is about shaping the framework around us. How much, in your opinion, is the challenge about the setup of our partnership? How much do you feel that the challenge is around the access to money? Is the financing there for us? And how do we facilitate this financing on a way that is really based on needs expressed by the cities, trying to be as compatible as possible with the Paris Agreement objectives?
Thank you very much for the relevant question. And let me extend my thanks to the hosts and the organizers. Well, the answer is citizens. So first of all, any initiative, be it of social, economic, or financial nature, must be built around the citizens. And I think working across the public and private sectors is a must. And specifically, as the mayors have described it, the most environmentally friendly and climate efficient solutions are not necessarily the cheapest one. So there is absolutely a need for blended finance with development institutions, offsetting the risks, and I would say the cost also, in the sense that the private sector could see an investment opportunity under such a framework. I think that overall compliance, the regulatory framework, and also the legal constraints are also important to encourage investors, but at the same time to push a little bit the flows of investment towards the green and the blue, I would say, economy in general. I think that these solutions must also be built around the sustainable development as a whole. So solutions that are only climate friendly, but not achieving or contributing to the achievement of social equality or inclusivity, or for instance, economic growth, have less chances, in fact, to succeed. So it is important always to have this tri-dimensional approach with environment, society, but also the economy in mind. And more specifically, I believe that it is important to create bridges between the industries, businesses, and also the rest of the civil society, to create at the same time economic, financial, but also commercial opportunities for all. Because creating jobs, for instance, is definitely a priority for cities and governments. So if while we are moving towards this greening the journey, if we could also match other priorities like creating jobs, like ensuring more important involvement of youth, of women into the economy, we would be much more successful. And I think also that raising the awareness of societies and also economic players is very critical, because at the end of the day, the achievement of sustainable development goals, of nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, for instance, and many other metrics and objectives related to biodiversity targets and all, is a shared priority. So basically, if we manage to make sure that the investment context is allocating the risk based on the ability of the different players from the public and the private sector, but also based on their appetite to take such risks, then we would be definitely successful in materializing these projects. And I believe that the PAMAX local investment finance facility, which we participate in, and CDG also is participating in the initiative, where we basically have three priorities to decarbonize the Mediterranean, including the ports and to green ports, to also increase the level of and the capacity of renewable energies, but also to potentially produce green hydrogen that is needed and required for the transition, as the panel before us has discussed in depth. So I just would like to finish on a note that we need the support of everyone, including the public sector, to push the multilateral development banks, the green and climate finance institutions like the GCF, for instance, and many others, to participate and contribute and join hands with the private sector in a different of ways, providing guarantees, equity and debt investments, and also grants to the communities and to the network of SMEs and private sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution, and also for a series of underlining a series of practical steps on how we can strengthen our collaboration across sector to really deliver on some important solutions for the decarbonization of our communities. You mentioned a few technologies that, of course, can help us, but we need to have the right finance and the right partnership in order to deploy them. And thank you also for stressing the role of citizens in this matter. And I think it's interesting also that you talked about a little bit of a change to a certain extent on how we discuss return on investment, because we're talking about jobs, we're talking about other indicators that are maybe not your usual ones when we talk to financial institutions, as well as risk. And I think this is another important element when it comes to really engaging with financial institutions. Who's the owner of the risk? How do we share the risk? And what do we consider by risk? Because not doing anything is also very much a risk. So maybe I would like to go to our colleagues here from the financial institution, and maybe I'll start with Sophia here to come back to our stage. So, of course, we hear all of our communities worldwide. You heard Cascais, you heard Chefchaouen, you heard many other examples, piloting different types of solutions, having a clear vision on how to future-proof the communities in which they live in. Yet, although there are these plans, although there are many projects ready in these different pipeline, there is still an issue in accessing finance. So can I ask you, what, in your experience, are the challenges? What makes a project investment ready, bankable? And what are the criteria that you think are still lacking to take that leap and really start it to move forward together? Sophia. And Joanna, heads up on the line, I'm going to come to you with a very similar question afterwards. So you have a little bit of time to prepare as well. You can use this if you want.
I was actually trying to buy some time to figure out the answer to your question, Georgia. But thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be in this panel, and also very pleased to meet with the mayor. I think a colleague of mine also introduced us. And I think this proves that there is, it's very important that local authorities engage with the DFIs as soon as possible. So you did talk about the upfront planning approach, which is really important. But what we need is to make sure that this upfront planning that is done either by the municipalities or by the regions also involve DFIs. Because if we are able to be there first and at the early stage, we can work with you and identify the relevant gaps and also try to point out to the different assessments that we need to do on our end or with the support maybe of external consultant. But really the issue, I think on my end, and I also attended a panel yesterday where one of the panelists said that the financing is here. So, you know, when we say that there is limited financing or limited financing sources, I actually don't think that is true. But it's really about the timing and making sure that we coordinate as much as possible and that we do that upfront. So there is a lot, you know, of stakeholders. Everyone is piloting an initiative, but we need to coordinate and we need to be able to coordinate at the early stages. Generally, we focus on the technical viability, on the financing, you know, mechanism. This is basically what hunts, you know, the partners that we work with. How will I be able to finance this project, you know? And in the best case scenario, it's also, am I making sure that this technical solution is the relevant one? But we rarely, you know, pause to think about two things. First, the need, you know, for the project to comply with the environmental standards, the procurement standard, and the bankability standards at DFI side. And the second one is also how to design the project properly. And this is more of, let's say, kind of sometimes layout presentation aspect to accommodate the proposals and the approval stages on the donor side. And this is, you know, for instance, at EBRD, we have a dedicated donor partnership department, which is the interface between the bank and the different donors, you know, either it could be the GCF, the HIPCA Climate Fund, it could be also multilateral funds, the EBRD Special Shareholder Fund. And actually, it all, I think, comes back to the timing, because we always, our colleagues always comes to us bankers and require, you know, to pipeline the project. So as long as on the ground we are aware of the needs, for instance, you know, of the city of Chefchaouen or Agadir municipality with whom we worked with together with CDG Capital last year, then we are able, you know, to pipeline those amounts up front. So the funding is here, but then it's mainly an issue of capacity, let's say. And we're here to support and work with the region, work with the municipalities. So that's I think, the main thing. Indeed, the blended financing approach is very relevant, especially when it comes to, yesterday there was this blue economy panel, and I think, you know, there are a lot of, let's say, things. I mean, it's not that we're repeating the same things, but it's just like, this is the key. First, for this project, and especially in Morocco, we can look at blended financing in the beginning. Ideally, it's a combination of having sub-sovereign loans to municipalities or to region, and this is very much in line with the regionalization program, you know, so the idea is really to be able to empower the local authorities, and it ensures also project and authority commitment. And it's also something that donors want to look at. They want to look at the potential to replicate this project in a cost-effective manner. So if, you know, a municipality can do this project and we're able to demonstrate that it can be replicated by another municipality or region, that there is that's something interesting that donor would like to prioritize, and we can get financing quite easily for this type of project. It's also important to show the ability to mainstream the climate change consideration at maybe the national level, or, you know, for the municipality, it could be within their municipal action plan, you know. So in an ideal scenario, it would be good if we could, for instance, have like a time machine, right, and go back and work with officials as soon as they're elected and as soon as they start to develop in their municipal action plan or regional development plan, so we can work hand in hand. But it doesn't mean, you know, that it's too late. I mean, we did it recently with Agadir, and I will let Leila talk about it in more detail. But just one thing that I'll be finished too, is the EBRD Green Cities Network. It's really our flagship EBRD program, which combines both investment, technical assistance support to the municipalities, but also to the region, because we also need to adapt in the context where we operate. And we do have a big network of green cities with more than 50 cities, where there is an exchange of expertise and also challenges between the different mayors. And hearing about other networking, initiatives, I think we should also start thinking about a network, an overarching network of these networks, just to ensure that there is complementarity and that we're not replicating, efforts without coordinating. So I do think it really comes back to coordination and involvement as soon as possible at the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sophia. I think everyone heard loud and clear there is money, which is always good to hear, but also very clear the message around really showing that there is a thinking around the mainstreaming or consideration around climate decarbonization across the board within the strategy, and then trying to work together as early as possible to understand how this project that are in the climate action plan can also become viable investment opportunities. I think that's very clear. And on your last point around network of networks, of course, I'm happy to facilitate some of these exchanges within the Urban Transition Mission, where obviously all of our cities are really looking forward to deploy on the ground some of the solutions being considered, but also I would definitely recommend that we find ways to leverage the 12,700 cities that are part of the Global Covenant of Mayors and share with them some of the lessons learned that you also have from your program, Green Climate Cities, which is very successful, by the way. But maybe, Joanna, I'll go to you now online, kind of continuing this conversation, because some of the things that came up are very much related to technical assistance in particular. And I know, of course, the World Bank has been pioneering together with the European Investment Bank and a number of other institutions, the City Climate Gap Fund, among others. Can you tell us a little bit more about your perception in terms of what do you think the challenges are in making some of this project investment ready? What is still missing? What are the keys to unlock really this partnership with the local level and enable some of the investment that is needed to further the transition?
Thanks, Georgia, and thanks for inviting me. I hope you hear me well.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Great, okay. So I will try to be brief and maybe pick up on some of the things I've heard from the other panelists as well. I think the key point is that no investment project, operates in a vacuum. It's within the city, it's within a certain enabling environment, it's whether the city can borrow or not, whether it can access the capital markets. So, an investment project on its own can't be financed without understanding that broader enabling environment. And I think that was mentioned by Mr. Diniz as well, especially, for example, energy transition. What regulations are there that allow cities to generate their own renewable energy, for example? And I think, of course, there are some basic minimum requirements, and my colleague from EBRD already talked about those. Do they have a solid design, feasibility study, environmental, social documents in place? Have they looked at alternatives? So I think those are the basic needs when thinking about, is a project investment ready? But beyond that, those are just the basic minimum conditions. I think investors need to have confidence that the city has in place forward-looking urban plans that think about how are you going to electrify, how are you going to advance charging, what does that mean for public space, are thinking forward-looking, and that they're implementing and enforcing their urban plans. So these are all parts of issues that make investors, have the confidence to invest. Also, of course, you need public buy-in, and the city needs to be able to communicate its strategies, goals, investment priorities to multiple financiers. So I think those are some of the key issues that we see. And from our side, we see sort of two tracks that we're working with cities through our technical assistance in this upstream area is really how do you build the fundamentals of that enabling environment? How do you also help cities with their municipal finance? So do they have the own source revenues? Are they looking at property tax? How can they leverage land value? What are the revenue streams that they need to be able to invite investors to come in, and have they really thought about their investment strategy? So how are they going to look at how to use public resources in the most efficient way to bring in other financiers, and how to reduce the risk for the private sector? So from our side, those are some of the big challenges. And as you said, we have the City Climate Finance Gap facility as well as our City Resilience Program, where we try to look at helping cities in some of those areas, and currently working with Fez in Morocco on their City Climate Action Plan, doing just that. But I can come back and say more in your second round, so I'll stop there, Georgia. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing some concrete examples of how you are working with cities, and there was actually a training of the City Climate Gap Fund just a couple of hours ago. Hope you had the opportunity to learn more about that specific technical assistance, but also very interesting the point that you made around really building the skills and the understanding on how to strengthen and use municipal finance in a way they can further attract investments and work with the private sector. I think this is a challenge that, for example, the Urban Transition Mission, we see quite a bit, with very good plans, with very good ideas and projects, but then kind of that missing gap in having an investment plan that can match that climate implementation plan. So looking forward to discussing a little bit more about that. But coming back here on stage and now going to discuss a little bit more about, how we can also work within the national and local context. So we are talking with CDG here, and my question to Leila would be, how can a national local bank support financing of climate action and energy transition? What type of instruments and vehicles do you see on the ground? Can you share some examples?
Thank you very much, Georgia. I'm very happy to be here to share our experience. So maybe just a few words about CDG Capital. CDG Capital is a 100% subsidiary of CDG Group, which is the first institutional investor in the country. CDG Capital specializes in financial advisory, debt financing, and asset management. So coming back to your question, I think one of the key success factors in financing SUD for us is our local presence. I think this element is key. We have the chance to have a mother company, which is the CDG Group, which has different capabilities that we can leverage, whether technical, financial, property, facility management. So we're in a position when we talk to cities to come up with like a one-stop solution. So this is really, really critical. And I think it really makes sense that, and we should really highlight that. Now, if we think about operational tools or solutions, the first one I can share with you is, as Sophia has just mentioned, is the fact that we can now allow cities to access new types of resources through capital markets. So CDG Capital helped structure the emission by the city of Agadir of the first municipality bond in Morocco for an amount about $1 billion Moroccan dirhams. And with these resources, the city will be able to implement an urban development plan, meaning green infrastructure projects. The second example I can share with you is about attracting the private sector, especially with PPPs. CDG Capital structured a $4 billion US desalination plant, again in Agadir, serving both the needs of agriculture and drinking water. And I think this experience taught us a lot, especially with regards to dealing with the private sector, because public and private have a different risk appetite, so it's very important to have a conversation as soon as possible to discuss the issues. With regards to this project, we also took part in the debt financing of this project along of a pool of local banks. This is what I wanted to share with you.
Well, thank you very much. I think this need of really understanding the potential into having one-stop solutions, it's quite essential because it's difficult for cities to navigate the opportunities that are out there, and it's fantastic to hear about the experience, of course, of Agadir, and to also your emphasis on trying to enable as much as possible the partnership with the private sector to operational tools and through, of course, implementing PPPs. I think all of these are wonderful opportunities for cities. So maybe going back to opportunities for cities, Mayor Sufiani, you heard it. We have technical assistance out there. We have funding out there. We have a lot of different opportunities. So if you had a magic wand, what would you do tomorrow for your city?
Thank you very much. I am the most happy man in the world because I have all these instruments with us. And I heard that Sofia and Leila says for us, and the second city after Agadir, that will be, inshallah, Chefchaouen, yes? No, I want to say, I will switch again to French. Ce que je veux dire, oui, nous avons maintenant notre plan d'action, un plan d'action et un plan d'action climat, comme j'ai dit. Je remercie encore une fois Climamed qui nous a aidés à mettre en place, à élaborer ce plan d'action. Donc, en termes de plan d'action, on est prêt maintenant, avec des normes internationales. Et c'est pour cela, moi, je suis très content que le Chefchaouen, et lors de la COP27, ça a été bien sûr annoncé officiellement. Tu as annoncé, Georgia, à Sharm el-Sheikh, que Chefchaouen a été sélectionné parmi les 48 villes, les premières 48 villes du monde qui joignent l'Urban Transition Mission. Donc pour nous, et c'est un aide, et non, pas seulement pour moi, pour toute l'équipe municipale. Il y a aussi avec moi, et je salue les deux vice-présidents, les two vice mayors are here with us, and the team of Chefchaouen municipality with us now in this room. And all of this, c'était une grande nouvelle pour nous que Chefchaouen et Casablanca, à l'époque, font partie des 48 premières villes du monde. Et puis il y a eu la global initiative de UNFCCC qui a été annoncée récemment. On fait partie des 11 premières villes du monde dans cette global initiative avec les Nations Unies. Donc on est là, on est prêt parce qu'il y a l'innovation et il y a l'accès à la finance internationale. Et l'accès à la finance internationale, c'est l'outil le plus important avec l'assistance technique pour passer du plan à l'implémentation sur terrain. Parce que nous avons besoin d'implémenter. Et là, je dis, et je l'ai dit plusieurs fois, qu'on passe à l'action now. Et aussi l'implémentation doit être faite now. Et aussi, pas seulement au niveau de mitigation, au niveau de l'atténuation, et aussi au niveau de l'adaptation en termes de climat. Et jusqu'à présent, vous le savez très bien, tu le sais très bien, Georgia, seulement 10% de la finance climat internationale va vers les villes. C'est pour cela qu'il faut innover. Et je crois que Urban Transition Mission, il a mis en place cet aspect innovation dans la planification et dans la recherche de la finance. C'est pour cela que moi je suis très content. Mais on n'a pas bien sûr, on n'est pas resté. Il y a le multiniveau l'action climat multiniveau qui est hyper indispensable. On ne peut pas parler de l'implémentation d'un plan d'action climat sans parler de l'action multiniveau. Il y a, c'est international, national, régional et local. C'est pour cela qu'on peut assurer ça. Ça, on l'a fait récemment avec UNCDF, Capital Development Fund des Nations Unies, qui a pris comme projet de l'éclairage public de Chefchaouen. C'est passer 100% LED et intelligent. Et j'espère, en tout cas, ça va être réalisé les mois qui viennent. Et ça va être peut-être la première ville au Maroc, au nord d'Afrique, qui a ça. Et pour nous, c'est important. Et 40% de ce financement, il nous vient de la Direction générale des collectivités territoriales, du ministère de l'Intérieur, et 60% de l'UNCDF. Donc ça, c'est un projet pour nos pilotes qu'on va mettre en place. Et c'est pour cela, en casquette de membres de la région Tanger-Tétouan-Hoceima, hier, nous avons aussi bataillé et nous avons demandé à l'UNCDF que ce soit implémenté dans d'autres villes. Nous ne pensons pas seulement à Chefchaouen, oui, mais aussi il y a d'autres villes en commençant par la région. Hier, ça a été signé une convention de créer un fonds régional pour l'éclairage public, pour l'énergie durable, pour toutes les villes du nord du Maroc, du nord de la région Tanger-Tétouan-Hoceima. Ça, première. Deuxièmement, et je remercie Joanna, parce que Chefchaouen, avec l'appui de GECOM, elle a bénéficié de GAFound. Donc, le GAFound, maintenant, il est en train de nous assister, il nous fait une assistance technique pour préparer un projet de valorisation des déchets solides, et bien sûr, avec l'appui de la DGCT qui nous a déjà donné un montant important pour pouvoir démarrer. Et là, donc, une étude exhaustive maintenant en assistance technique qui est en cours. Pour résumer, moi je dis, il y a cette ambition, cet engagement politique, il y a ce plan, mais pour passer à l'implémentation, nous avons besoin de l'assistance technique et l'accès à la finance internationale. Et là, bien sûr, nous voulons que cet accès soit beaucoup plus facile, parce que maintenant, qu'on soit vraiment clair, l'accès actuellement n'est pas facile pour les villes, du tout. C'est pour cela que ce GAFound, c'est directement sans passer par les agences accréditées. Mais maintenant, on se tourne vers les agences accréditées pour leur présenter des grands projets, parce qu'il y a la question de scale, de taille aussi, qui est importante, pour des projets qui pourront passer de l'idée et du plan à des projets bancables. Et c'est ça le maillon de la chaîne qui manque, qu'on doit renforcer. Et Urban Transition Mission, il est là pour ça. Et merci Georgia, merci GECOM, d'avoir lancé cette initiative mondiale pour passer de la planification et des fiches de projet à des véritables projets qui sont acceptés par les institutions financières mondiales et dans un cadre multiniveau pour les mettre en œuvre. Et je crois que ça va être bien sûr une tache d'huile qui va se répandre. Et c'est contagieux, c'est très bonne chose qu'il soit contagieux, parce que ça va toucher d'autres villes au Maroc, au nord d'Afrique, en Afrique et dans le monde entier, et spécialement dans le Global South. Voilà ce que je voulais dire. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this very strong message of readiness to really act and to be collaborative. To further these activities and the vision also that your city and cities that are working with you really have, but also for talking about the effect that good technical assistance can have on implementing projects. And since we're talking about international cooperation, Laila, I would like to go back to you, if that's okay. And I would like we heard about how important international cooperation can be when it comes to learning from each other and really experiencing and together challenges, but also finding solutions. What do you think when it comes to finance and international cooperation? What do you think the key challenges and opportunities are?
Thank you for this very interesting question. I have two examples to share with you. The first one is about regular DFIs, and then the second one is about the Green Climate Fund. So I'm going to start with the normal, if I may say so, for regular DFIs. Of course, one of the main objectives is when we leverage international cooperation is to do blending finance, which means attracting concessional loans, which will de-risk the project, make it more bankable, etc. So this is very critical. Now, coming back to the challenges, I think project preparation is very critical for designing innovative projects with social, climate, economical components. And most DFIs come with this technical assistance when they look at projects. So this is really, really good for improving the innovation of the project. DFIs also challenge us in terms of environmental and social safeguards, and I think Sophia said a word about that. For instance, when EIB and AFD financed the eco-city of Zenata, they put a lot of focus in terms of population resettlement. So we have to live with that. We cannot have it all, and maybe it's better for the social aspect of the project. Now I want to share with you another experience, which is with the Green Climate Fund, which is the largest climate fund in the world. CDG Capital was accredited by this fund back in 2017, and we were able to have this accreditation to channel projects, to channel funds for projects up to $250 million using a different range of instruments. I have to say that although we value a lot the contribution of the GCF in general, we think that their climate criteria are very complicated to achieve, at least for a national development bank. So I guess this fund is also learning and improving, so it's worth mentioning. Maybe one last word about currency exchange and financing in local currency. Most DFI, as far as I know, have mostly finance in dollars or euros. So sometimes this hedging can cost a lot for cities, whatever. So if DFIs can think about financing a local currency or find solutions, I think that would be good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your experience and also for having an open and frank conversation about some of the conditions in which we are collaborating internationally. I think it's important to understand also what the challenges are for all the actors across the playing field, and for sharing this with us. I want to go to Anis Tarai, if he's still online with us. And Anis, we kind of talked about challenges now for the interest in collaborating, but also the challenges that National Climate Development Bank are facing. We talked about some of the challenges that are being faced at the local level in terms of really kind of finding the right way and the right moment to trigger some of the projects that have been developed and included into the different action plan. We heard about the fact that there is money out there, that investors are also looking for investment opportunity, yet very often it feels like this financial decision-making is not always aligned with the timing and with the procedures that these plans have, and that innovation has in particular when we are testing something new. So maybe a question to you, from your perspective, what kind of challenges did you encounter, and what do you think the role of the private sector itself is in trying to enable and unlock these partnerships and finance? Just checking with the colleagues here if they can confirm that Anis is still on the line. Oh, here he is. Hello, Anis, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me now?
Perfect, okay. Did you hear the question?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic.
In fact, I started answering the question.
Okay, I'll give you the floor then, thank you.
No worries. So I was saying that we must first acknowledge that there is a cognitive dissonance between climate action imperatives at one hand and profit-making targets at the other one. So that's the reality. So and sometimes, as we discussed earlier, and as the other speakers alluded to, it is hard to protect the environment, have a positive climate action, and make money. So that's the crude reality. The good news is that it's not always the case, and that there are some prerequisites that need to be met, and a certain environment that needs to be created. And I think that we should collectively join hands to bridge these two different dimensions, and they are not opposing, they are just different. And in order to do that, each of the public and the private sector should do what they are best at. So private sector should not substitute to the public sector, and the public sector should absolutely not substitute to the private sector. So meaning that, for instance, when it comes to upstream projects, feasibility studies, all the technical assistance around the projects to materialize, as was very well described by the mayors, what is ideas and projects to actual bankable transactions. In general, this is more or less the role of the public windows, be it national institutions, multilateral institutions, the Green Climate Fund, etc., as we discussed. Now, while doing that, I think that we should all be mindful of the risks, but also the difficulties that any first-time investment strategy faces, be it for climate or anything else. So basically, first iterations of investment strategies must be supported, and the support comes from the the public sector through all of its different forms. And gradually, these investment strategies may reach a certain point of maturity or break-even, by which they become economically viable transactions and full-fledged businesses, where the private sector autonomously can then, take over and realize such investments on its own. So, but to get there, we need both to work together. And I think that the firepower, if I may say that, of financial resources resides with the public sector. And the agility, the innovation, and also maybe the practicality of investing resides with the private sector. My colleague earlier referred to the GCF, yes, but not only the GCF. I mean, all the these big institutions have a certain amount of bureaucracy, of procedures, and they need it, because otherwise, they couldn't be focused on what is their mandate. So the idea is to see how these resources could be basically shared with the private sectors in specially created vehicles. I referred to the PAMEX local investment finance facility. So a kind of public-private initiatives, and then let the private sector lead the way in investing, in finding projects and structuring these projects. So I think that this is the way forward. And from our side, when it comes to greening the ports in the Mediterranean, we have done some good job in identifying projects, supporting certain projects to reach bankability. And we are open to get more projects and also more resources. And on this, I think Mayor Deniz may have a project in his constituency, and I would be interested to hear more about it.
Thank you. I also love the opportunity to discuss further concretely what can be done. And thank you very much also for giving us your version of the magic wand. I really liked it, this idea that we want to make money, protect the environment, and also safeguard the well-being of our citizens. I think that, you know, it's a type of magic wand that we really want to be able to wave for our future. And you mentioned some of the levers that can be used by the private sector in particular within its role and within the kind of strong suits of the activities that the private sector can carry out. But I also want to reflect on the public levers. And maybe Joao, I hope you're still on the line with us. I wanted to go back to you and ask you a bit of a question from your perspective. I know Cascais has been really trying to test out different solutions of engagement with the private sector and have been exploring ways to optimize procurement rules, but also to make sure that they test in innovation in order not only to scale up the size of projects, but also to really aggregate some of the solutions that you are implementing on the ground. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges, but in particular any lever that you found works really well in fostering these partnerships?
Okay, so I would say that the first leverage that we have are the citizens. Transitioning into a sustainable, well-developed, low-carbon-based economy and city is highly desirable by anyone. It endorses a better quality of life. It gives us more opportunities for jobs. It gives us a lot more than we can currently grasp. And this is in a world where cities are becoming more competitive and even more competitive than entire countries. So what have we been doing, and what is the interest in this? Firstly, we must understand that we have current costs. We have costs of energy, we have costs of mobility, we have difficult to measure costs. The cost, for example, of COVID, how much does a family need to endure when they are stuck in a house without living or fulfilling their livelihood and daily life as a family, for example. This is extremely challenging for anyone to address. In our case, when we address decarbonization principles, we merge a lot of solutions at the same time. Let's call it a multidimensional approach. We endorsed, for example, the hydrogen on mobility. We endorsed electricity on mobility, electric mobility. And we also addressed the smooth mobility with bicycle rents, our own bicycles provided by the city, or our little scooters, electric scooters. So by merging all these different solutions, what you are giving are sustainable options. And they are quite competitive, because if you go full electric or full hydrogen or anything like that, it will be difficult to engage and merge all the desirability and users that you have in cities. That's the first approach. The second one is, let's change the way we see financial and mathematics. And how can we do that? Well, first of all, when we invest in, let's say, solar-powered energy, which is something like we have here in Portugal, of course, and in cities, it's the prime opportunity for renewable production. We are looking into solar power for our buildings, right? But there's a high investment cost. Of course, we need to consider the high investment cost, but the long, or in this case, the short-term return of investment. Solar is nowadays in Portugal between 5 to 6 years, and you get your money back. So what's the challenge here? Well, it's not financial. There's enough money and funding going on around there. It's the regulatory again, where we need to endorse ourselves by providing, let's say, a licensing scope where all new buildings must have these technologies, for example. And to support your financial approach on this, we will buy the excess of your energy. We're talking about energy community, which is something that we are doing. The city of Cascais, with its schools, hospitals, sport infrastructure, public buildings, we are the municipalities or the city's biggest energy and water consumers, right? So we can help all the citizens to invest money on this. We will buy the excess of energy. So your return of investment, instead of going for, let's say, 6 to 5 years, it could be 3 to 4. So isn't that wonderful? We are working together at different scales with different stakeholders, but above all, we are working with humans. And I think that's the secret of our success, and that's where we are driving, because we have a community of practice, and everybody wants to know more. Everybody wants to be interested. And I can reply to an email of a citizen, and I can also reply to an email of an investor that has, let's say, 100 million euros of a fund to invest on these green solutions. So I would say that it's the diversity of approach that you have, but also the coherence to engage with everyone. I would keep it at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joao. Very clear. I think your point on really being able to see cities not only as a space of co-creation, collaboration, but also of virtuous competition is not is something that it really inspires also the view around innovative approaches, and this idea also of approaching the change that needs to be done not by sector but through a multidimensional approach, I think is also essential to explain how we can deliver on a holistic urban transition. So I have one last question to Sophia and to Johanna, because we talked about this multidimensional approach, cross-sectoral approach. We talked about a lot of ideas and things that need to be tested out, new solutions, but we still have an issue around size very often and scale. We have a lot of pilot projects that are being implemented, specific vehicles, specific tools that are being tested in different places, yet we don't manage to get quite to the scale that becomes appealing very often for investors. So my question would be, what do you think is the role of aggregation of demand for solutions in delivering more financial flows for the urban transition? And what is the role of financial institutions in making that happen? Sophia, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. But before answering your question, I just want to go back to some points that Leila raised, especially regarding the currency and the lending terms of DFIs, and just to flag that as EBRD in Morocco, but also in our other countries of operation, we are able to provide, and we do provide and encourage to have our loans in local currency. So for the Agadir municipal bond, we did subscribe up to 400 million dirham. So, we've seen, of course, around some announcements about some sovereign loans with regions or other local authorities which were in hard currency, which, to be honest, I have a hard time understanding, because we are exposing local authorities to FX risk, although they do not have any revenues which are denominated in foreign currency. So I'm very happy to be with an institution who is also sensitive about this issue. And just to reiterate that we are able, and we have never envisaged doing a loan in other currency than the local currency when it comes to engaging with local authorities in Morocco, because the idea indeed is try to mitigate the risk and not expose them to additional risk. On the point with working with GCF, I think it comes back also to coordination. We do work with the GCF a lot, who has provided a 30 million euro grant in one of the irrigation projects we are doing with the Ministry of Agriculture. And I know that we do have a dedicated team in HQ who works with, also interact with the GCF quite often, and we do have a lot of other programs which we co-implement with them. So we could be worth also considering, let's say, workshop sessions of facilitation on EBRD, so that, for instance, National Development Bank like CDG Capital can better access, the financing and understand the criteria from the GCF. And then coming back to your question on scale, indeed, sometimes the size of a project can also make it a barrier to access into financing. But again, at EBRD, we're happy to work, it's so far our portfolio, for instance, in Morocco, is really, we do have like big projects, but we also now have in the pipeline a lot of small projects, either with regions or with municipalities. So we are very happy, to work on small projects as well, but we acknowledge that we need to play a role in establishing platforms where the private sector, which can lead on innovation and foster technical advances, can can present, this technical solution and facilitate also the introduction with other partners like the private sector who can, the private investor, but also with other co-financiers who would be interested to replicating this at a bigger scale. And for instance, I know CDG, but CDG Développement, another subsidiary of CDG, has also been working on the possibility of scaling up street lighting projects in Morocco and considering a national program at a broader level to facilitate the access to financing. We've been also discussing with our CDG colleagues on that, and these are some examples of initiatives where we can work on developing a pool of small-sized projects to make sure that they have access to financing.
Thank you very much for that, Sophia. And Joanna, you have the tough job to be the last, to give even the last response to our panel of the day, and I want to make it even more difficult. So we've been talking about aggregation, of course, of different projects. One thing that with the UTM we are considering is also to see how aggregation could be not just between cities, but also ideally with cities in our network potentially. So kind of exploring new ways of doing things. And while we are discussing that, of course, there is a challenge around the aggregation of projects when it comes to mitigation, but it's even worse when we are talking about scale and size of the funding needed for adaptation. So can I ask you to reflect on the aggregation piece, but also to maybe to think about a little bit if there is anything that should be done differently when it comes to climate adaptation? I think, just checking if Joanna is still on the line with us.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I said you left me with some difficult questions at the end there. So, I mean, we know that resources are limited, and as IFIs, we also have limited resources, right? And when we're looking to access climate finance, we often hear that we need to generate significant amount of emissions reduction to be of interest, right? So when we're working at cities on individual projects, that's very difficult to tell a story. And that's why I think we think about aggregation of investments or investment projects at two levels. One is, for example, on a citywide basis. So how do we aggregate multiple investments within one city to put forward for financing, for example. So we're working with the city of Casablanca, where we have a $300 million loan just to the city, and it's based on a performance basis. So it has, for example, disbursement-linked indicators for improvements that they make on energy efficiency and street lighting, wastewater reuse, for example. So how do you, on a city scale, generate the volume of investments that are needed to really generate sort of access to climate finance needed by cities? And then the other modality we use is across multiple cities, right? Through either financial intermediaries or development banks. How do we work with them to finance across multiple cities these types of smaller investments that were mentioned previously? And this is where, for example, in Morocco, we have a similar performance-based program with the 100 largest municipalities in Morocco to support kind of municipal investments. So I think when it comes to emissions reduction, those are the challenges. When it comes to adaptation, the biggest challenge, of course, is the lack of the revenue stream. And that's the challenge that we see, and a challenge for many of the IFIs, in particular those that require to work on a project finance basis. For the World Bank, I mean, we have actually some of the highest volumes of adaptation finance of all of the MDBs. But I think if we're going to take it to scale, really thinking about the revenue streams, when you're reducing risk in a city by putting in adaptation measures, you're also creating land value. You're creating opportunities for investment. How do you capitalize on that? How do you find business opportunities, whether you're, introducing adaptation through mangrove swamps? How do you create livelihood opportunities? So always thinking about what is the revenue stream that you can bring investors in to finance these things. So I will stop there, Georgia. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And sorry for giving you the tough question at the very last round, but I also wanted to somehow flag that, of course, this is just the beginning of a much bigger and larger conversation, in particular where we talk about responding holistically to the needs of cities. And before I give the floor to Mayor Sofiani for a short announcement, I would like to wrap up just with some consideration about the discussion of today. So, what did we hear? We heard that we need better coordination and better partnerships. When do we need them? As early as possible, at the earliest stage possible. How can we enable this cooperation? We can leverage what each stakeholder can do best. This is what we heard. Financiers, private sector, local governments, they all have a role to play. Let's make sure that we optimize this role. We can support already existing pipelines that cities have been developing in their own climate action plan. We just need to find ways to innovate and deliver on this potential. So what is coming up next, besides, of course, continuing this conversation? We need to leverage as much as possible the political commitment that we have and really try to align and complement across level of governance the work that we are doing to optimize our action on the ground. We have money, we heard it. For many people said that, so it can't be taken back. We do have funds there. We just need to make sure that it's channeled via the correct technical assistance that can prepare a business case for everyone. We also have an interest from the private sector in this great market opportunity that the urban transition can deliver to improve the quality of life, but also to economically develop our societies. And then finally, we also have some frameworks out there. I mentioned, of course, the Global Covenant of Mayors, where cities can come together, test and learn from each other, but also the Urban Transition Mission to test new approaches, to continue the collaboration with all of you. We are there to make sure that this partnership, this discussion becomes something tangible that is delivered on the ground. So do make use of the Urban Transition Mission, do make use of the pioneer cities like Chefchaouen, like Cascais, like Casablanca, that have already embarked on this journey together with us. I want to thank my panelists very much, both online and in presence, and of course the audience for staying with us. Although we started over time, and obviously we finished over time, it was a great discussion, and I am really thankful for all of you, for your insight and for your time. And Mayor, I give you the floor now for this announcement.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Only to thank you, to thank GCOM, to thank all panelists here and online. And I see that was a very interesting session today, this morning. Now I want to, je veux annoncer, bien sûr, que avec with my friends of GCOM, we discussed one idea, one project for the next year, 2024, to organize the Chefchaouen Finance Forum that will be next year, inshallah, with the support of GCOM and many other partners and friends from ICLE, from Climamed, from UN Habitat, from UCLG, from UNCDF at international level, and from national level, the region and the ministry and other. We will explain the idea with institutional finance institutions here in Morocco to explain that will be one meeting, a high-level meeting that goes to the finance, to the local finance, to the access for Morocco, for Africa, for the global south, and that will be opportunity for all cities of the world, for all financial institutions, for all platforms and networks from cities and regions to sit together and to talk about about opportunity of finance and concrete solution to implement our action plans in our cities. Thank you very much.